New data from the U.S. Census Bureau reveals a stark shift in America's demographic landscape, a sharp slowdown in population growth, with immigration playing a central role in the change. The 2025 estimates, the first full year under new immigration policies, show that the United States grew by only 0.5%, its slowest rate in decades, mainly because net international migration has dropped sharply. In this video, we'll break down what the census numbers actually show, how immigration policy and enforcement have contributed to this trend, what it means for states and key sectors of the economy, and why this matters for people across the country. The Census Bureau's latest estimates, released in January 2026, show that as of mid-2025, the U.S. population reached approximately 341.8 million people. But the rate of growth was just 0.5%, or about 1.8 million additional people over the previous year. This is a steep drop from 2024, when the growth rate was nearly 1%, fueled in large part by immigration. Immigration, measured as net international migration, the difference between people moving into the U.S. from abroad and those leaving, contributed roughly 1.3 million people to the total population in 2025. That's down by more than half from the previous year, when immigration added nearly 2.7 million people. By comparison, natural increase, births minus deaths, contributed about 519,000 people, a relatively small part of the total change. According to census officials, this is the slowest population growth rate since the pandemic-era low in 2021, and a major reason is the drop in net immigration. So what's behind this steep drop in immigration? Experts point to several policy shifts that have taken place since January 2025, when the second Trump administration took office and immigration enforcement became a central priority. Stricter enforcement along the southern border, expanded workplace inspections and arrests, and more aggressive removal efforts have all contributed to declining arrivals and rising departures. In addition, changes in asylum procedures and reductions in humanitarian parole have made it harder for new arrivals to obtain legal status, further reducing immigration flows. Data suggests that fewer people are entering and more may be leaving, partly in response to the enforcement climate. Some analysts have even concluded that net international migration, the key driver of U.S. population growth for decades, could become negative if current trends continue, meaning more people leave than arrive. That would be the first sustained period of negative net migration in over 50 years. The impact of these population trends isn't uniform across the country. States that historically relied heavily on immigration for growth, such as California, Florida, and New York, saw large drops in net migrant arrivals last year. For example, California, once a powerhouse of population growth, actually lost about 9,500 residents in 2025. Florida also saw year-over-year drops in both immigration and domestic migration. New York added only a little over 1,000 people total, mainly because immigrant arrivals shrank sharply. By contrast, some southern and southeast states, such as South Carolina, North Carolina, and Texas, continued to register relatively strong growth, largely driven by internal migration from other U.S. states rather than international immigration. Several smaller states, including Vermont, Hawaii, West Virginia, and New Mexico, actually saw total population declines in 2025, reflecting broader shifts in migration, both domestic and international. Population growth, and particularly immigration-driven growth, matters for more than just numbers on a chart. First, economic growth is closely tied to population growth. A larger population supports a larger workforce, broader consumer demand, and greater economic dynamism. With immigration down, economists warn that labor shortages could become more pronounced, especially in industries that have long depended on immigrant workers, such as construction, agriculture, healthcare, and hospitality. Second, fiscal sustainability. including Social Security and Medicare, depends in part on a healthy ratio of working-age individuals to retirees. Declining immigration can accelerate the aging of the population, putting additional pressure on government programs. Third, slowed growth can impact congressional representation and federal funding formulas. The census numbers help determine how seats in the House of Representatives are apportioned and how federal funds are allocated to states. Significant shifts in population patterns can thus reshape political power and funding priorities. The recent slowdown is also noteworthy because for decades, immigration has been the main engine of U.S. population growth. Without it, the U.S. would be growing more slowly, and experts warn this could have long-term consequences for economic competitiveness. It's one thing to say immigration numbers have dropped, but it's another to understand how policy choices shape these trends. Under the current administration, enforcement agencies such as Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and Customs and Border Protection, CBP, have focused resources on reducing unauthorized entries and increasing removals. These efforts, alongside more restrictive asylum and parole policies, are all contributing to fewer new arrivals and potentially more departures. Experts also observe that policy uncertainty and enforcement fear can deter would-be migrants from even attempting to come to the U.S., adding a psychological component to demographic change. While census figures don't distinguish legal from unauthorized immigration, the net decline reflects lower entries overall. Not all experts interpret the numbers the same way. Some caution that survey participation, particularly among immigrant communities, can decline in an enforcement climate, which may affect estimates. Other analysts, however, emphasize the structural trend. Policy choices directly influence migration flows and demographic outcomes. They point to historical parallels, such as immigration dips during past restrictive periods, to explain how legal and enforcement shifts can have measurable population effects. It's also important to recognize that natural increase, births minus deaths, remains positive but relatively low compared with immigration's contribution in prior years. That means if immigration stays low, the U.S. may experience slower overall growth for years to come. Looking forward, demographers and policymakers are watching closely. If current trends continue into 2026 and beyond, net international migration could shrink further, possibly reaching historically low or even negative levels, a situation not seen in over half a century. Economic forecasters warn this could affect workforce dynamics, entrepreneurship, and innovation. A smaller pool of working-age people could slow growth in key sectors unless offset by higher productivity or policy changes. Policy debates are already underway in Washington and among analysts about whether immigration policy should be adjusted to support continued population growth, address labor gaps, or respond to changing demographic patterns. Some proposals suggest targeted legal immigration reforms to bring back higher levels of newcomers, while others argue that current restrictions are necessary for border security and economic stability. What the latest census data show is a major demographic shift in the United States, driven largely by changes in immigration flows. Population growth has slowed to its lowest rate in decades, and immigration, once the main engine of growth, has dropped sharply. These trends have widespread implications, from economic performance to political representation to the future of communities across the nation. As these discussions continue, we'll keep you updated with clear, factual analysis. If you found this breakdown helpful, please tap like and let us know in the comments what aspect of this story you want explored more, whether it's the economic impact, state differences, or how this could affect visas and immigration policy in the coming years. For trusted coverage of how population, immigration, and travel trends intersect and evolve, subscribe to U.S. Travel and Immigration Update. Thanks for watching.